Can you talk about live streaming, cross-posting, sponsoring, and partnerships? I'm doing my first live stream next week and gathered some sponsors to pay for the band. Wasn't sure how much to charge. I figured it'll be easier once I know how many viewers I can expect. Yes, so that's a great question, Andrew. So Andrew runs a big band. I see he just joined right now, just in time for me to answer his question. So I will say this. I would not necessarily get your hopes too high that things will start off too quickly. You have to start somewhere and build slowly, and build awareness over time that you're doing live streams, and that's something that you're going to consistently do. So first of all, is to make sure that you can get the quality high enough that people could pay for it, especially if you're asking for sponsors. So if you don't at least have one good camera, it's going to be pretty difficult to set up a good live stream. And I think he's doing it with a big band, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew. But you're going to want to get a decent microphone setup. You're going to want to do some test runs, figure out some software. I like to use this software called Ecamm Live. After it's done, I'll drop the link to it into the Facebook comments. So if you're watching this and you want to find that software, but that's where it's going to be. It'll be in the comments down below here, and down below on Facebook, that is. On Instagram, you'll just have to go to find it on Facebook. But making sure the quality is high enough. So that means you probably need a DSLR camera, you're going to need a capture card, you're going to need some microphones, you're going to need some software. There's open source software called OBS that you can use that's free, that you can figure out how that uses. I also personally use this website called Restream to send the signal out to various live streaming websites, because right now, yes, it's on Facebook, but it's also on Twitch, which is now connected to my Amazon Music. And it also goes out to, well, I tried to send it out to LinkedIn and they didn't approve it, and it goes out to Periscope, which is attached to Twitter. So, just trying to send it out to as many places as you can. You need to invest in that software. So if you're just going to do it in one location, though, great. So there you go. He says he's already got OBS. He says he's got only 6 people. That's a good place to start. So definitely do a test run before you go, because there's always something that goes wrong, seemingly. It took me at least 4 or 5 weeks at the beginning of this, back in April, to figure out, do I need a light? Which I have a light behind me now here, and there's a light over here. And how do I set up? How do I make the background relatively appealing? Not that this is the best, right? But just like it was better than in my office at school when it was just like kind of random junk everywhere. So thinking about what's behind you, thinking about the set, figuring out the live streaming, testing out the live streaming, making sure it's working, because there's nothing worse than starting an event. And so it sounds like you already have a person to help you run it. So I was going to say, having an engineer to run the live stream. I watched a great live stream last night from Monk's Jazz, which is a club in Austin. And Andre Hayward played, a great trombonist. He used to play with the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra. Anyway, he did a live stream from there last night, super well set up. So if you want to look at that that's a great example. Monk's Jazz, you can find it on Facebook pretty easily. So I would just head over there and check that out, because that would be a good place to start. Sponsors. So make sure that you don't under deliver for your sponsors is the most important thing. Making sure you price it low enough to start, and then you can raise from there. Make sure you're very clear about what you're going to offer them in exchange for the sponsorship. If it's just good Samaritan behavior, or if you're going to put a banner in your live stream that has it, or you're going to use like if you use the software that I use, Ecamm Live, you can overlay some logos. You could overlay information, or you could put like a scrolling like thank you to our sponsor thing. So just be really clear as to what people are going to get for their money. And yeah, after you do one, it'll be pretty clear, but just keep it in mind. Like last night, Andrew, if you're watching that live stream, you could see how many people were watching, which was a decent amount, but not in the hundreds. When I looked, there was maybe 50 people on YouTube and 50 people on Facebook. And I don't know how many of those were overlapping, probably a couple that like started on one and switched to the other. So I would keep your expectations realistic and start getting people to sign up. So if you can get people to save in advance, like the link, or do pre-save or something like that, that's going to be helpful for you to be able to get a good idea of what it's going to be. And I think it's going to take investment on your part from the first one, like you're going to pay the band, you're going to pay for everything, and then you're going to see what you can do with it after you kind of get some information. It's hard to pinpoint a price. I couldn't tell you what it would be, quote unquote, worth to the advertiser or the sponsor. It could just be they want to just sponsor music, and that could be a good way. Maybe you want to find a nonprofit that can be a fiscal sponsor, so they could be a tax write-off for them, for a person or for a business, instead of looking for sponsors for advertising dollars when you're not exactly sure what that might be worth, and it's going to be worth different things to different people. So it also needs to price yourself at a level where you feel comfortable. I've sold sponsorships to certain outside in music releases. We've done that, and it's just really important to be super clear about, like, this is what you're going to get, this is how much it costs. And I always say over deliver, under promise and over deliver, because if it's the opposite of that, you're never going to get anybody coming back. So that's really pretty important. Hi Nick, how important is the gear for our playing? Mouthpiece and trombone. I play a professional Yamaha trombone, but been playing the same 12C mouthpiece since I was 12, and now I'm 23. Any thoughts? Well, I've been playing the same mouthpiece for at least that long, first of all. Also, that's cool. Costa Rica. I was supposed to come there in June. Things got canceled, but hope to come soon. Gear. Okay, so I am always the last person to blame the gear. I always think it's me. There's certain things that are not negotiable for me, and one of them is blaming the gear. And so I think you need to find the right tool to match the sound concept you have in your head. You have to match the sound concept, the playing concept. The equipment is like a tool in that regard, but it's not the end all be all. It's not going to make you great. A great trombone is only as good as you are as a trombonist. So I see a lot of people thinking, I need to switch mouthpieces, and you do this and you do that. But the important thing is for you to be consistent and stick on that mouthpiece, But if your concept changes, like the mouthpiece is too small, I can't get the sound that I want out of this mouthpiece, maybe start exploring some other options. I would say that it's not that important. There's some great videos on YouTube you can find of Irby Green and Bill Watrous playing student model trombones. Student horns, stock mouthpiece, 12C, doesn't matter. So I would just say that the equipment is not really that important. I mean, it's important if you have a broken trombone, you need to fix it so you can play. It should be easy to play, relatively. Years and years switching all the time, and it's really detrimental to their growth, I think, because they're constantly switching equipment, and the equipment has nothing to do with how much time you've put in as a player, So that's the answer. How does one play tunes a cappella? All right, that's a really good question. It's something that I've been working on. I started thinking about it because I found some videos of Wycliffe Gordon and Steve Turre, two of my teachers, who had different opportunities that they presented concerts of solo trombone. And so for me, that was super inspiring. And we also worked on a little bit in lessons with Professor Turre. We worked a little bit on the solo thing. So I developed a few tunes that I could play solo, but I only have a few in the repertoire, but it's been very, very useful for being able to develop stuff for clinics, like when you're doing a masterclass or a clinic and you don't have a rhythm section, like having something that you can play that you feel really good about, that involves improvisation, that involves some organization, is really cool. So it's something that I want to get my students to do more, and it's a good reminder to make them do it. So if any of my students are watching, watch out. It's coming next. So things that I think about when I'm playing a tune a cappella, I mean, there's actually the first thing is being able to play it without the metronome and play in time, play the changes, be clear. Those are kind of the prerequisites for what we're going to go into next. So if you can't play a blues by yourself, or even just play a blues with a metronome, there's probably not a whole lot of hope that you're going to be able to put together one of these a cappella arrangements until you can do that. So practice getting super clear, practice getting super comfortable. That's one thing. Being on your own, playing on your own, creating the time, creating the feel, creating the energy. And from there, then what I like to think about is the different textures. That's what I was looking for. I don't know, orchestration textures of like, what can you do? So when I think about that, if I just brainstorm quickly some different textures, I'm thinking like Okay, I can play pedal notes. I can play high notes. I can play fast. I can play slow. I can play in time. I can play out of time. I can play rubato. I can just solo. I can play pre-written out stuff. I can play, I can try to like outline the harmony, or I can play melodies. So then I think about all the things that I want to incorporate into that arrangement. So it might be the melody, some improvisation, some kind of arrangement. There's certain tunes that I play solo, like I started doing this in like 2015 or something. There's a version of Stella by Starlight that I put together solo, inspired by Slide Hampton. I heard Slide do an arrangement. It was actually a bootleg from a live gig, and Slide was playing by himself, and so it was killing. And I was inspired to put my own arrangement together. So finding some inspiration is super important, to be able to get ideas, right? And so, like I said, I was talking to my teachers, Steve Turre, Wycliffe Gordon, about this. Or watching their videos rather, to be inspired. And so you get the texture, different textures. You practice different textures that you can do. If you check out some of the arrangements, there's like fast playing that kind of outlines changes. There's melody, there's soloing, and then you got to decide on an order. And sometimes I don't do any improvisation. Like I play Single Pedal of a Rose. And I originally arranged that for my Here and Now record, but I wrote it for 3 bass clarinets and 3 trombones and rhythm section. And when do I ever get those? When do I ever have those on the road? Never. So I figured out, Duke originally played it as a solo piano arrangement. So I decided I could also figure out how to play it as a solo trombone arrangement. So one thing at a time, you got to think about textures, figure out how you can be super clear and clean with your approach, and then put it all together. And then you have to do it a bunch of times. So that's how you play a cappella. Have you ever played reggae or ska? Yes. What would be keys for improvising? Listen to soloists in that style and transcribe them. There's a famous trombone solo on Sublime. What's that song? The famous Sublime song. There's a trombone solo. I would learn that. I had a phase where I was listening to ska a lot in high school. And so I was playing in a bunch of bands like that. So yes, transcribe that music. Just like if you were playing funk, I would tell you to go transcribe Fred Wesley. There's already people that do it super well. So go and copy them, and then you can make it your own. How do you recommend an instrumentalist go about creating a personal practice routine? What I do is I usually suggest using a practice journal to track everything that you're doing. And then trying to figure out what makes sense, what's the best order to do things, what's the most efficient order to do things. Because what I started to do is I started to notice I was putting a lot of hours, quote unquote, in the practice room, but I wasn't having a lot of time that was really actually dedicated to the music, like it was just me kind of goofing around, playing piano on the phone, not really actually really digging into the music. So for me, that was pretty important. To just list it out. So I just track it super, super specifically, like, all right, it's 1250 right now. So from 1250 to 1255, I worked on the F major scale. And then I just kind of keep track of everything I've done. And what I found was 3 sessions for 90 minutes was about the sweet spot for me. That was a good amount of concentrated time. Sometimes I would go to 2 hours, but after 2 hours, I was just kind of wasting time. So I decided to start making 90-minute to 2-hour blocks that I could squeeze in, because like 30, 45 minutes, it just wasn't enough for me to kind of dig in and really absorb anything. But it's different for everybody. So if there's anything about my teaching style, is that I really am a person that believes in that it's different for everyone, and you have to figure out what works for you in terms of chops, in terms of conception, in terms of sound, in terms of, there's certain like guiding principles, but you have to ultimately find a way for it to work for you. So same with practicing, some people can only concentrate for 45 minutes. So great, do 5 45-minute sessions in a day rather than one long session, So I break things up to like trombone stuff, and like technical stuff and like jazz stuff, or you could make different categories if you want, but always dealing with the instrument first, then dealing with like learning hard stuff that has to do with being free to then improvise later, if that makes sense. So if it's like patterns, or if it's getting familiar with new scales or transcriptions, etc. And then like in that third section of practice, it might be learning tunes and just playing and applying all of that stuff that I worked on in that second practice session, which I was able to do because I worked on the fundamentals in the first practice session. So that's kind of how I look at it. It's like everything builds on it. It builds on itself. And one thing at a time. That's all you can do, right? Practice one thing at a time, track it, be as efficient, as effective as you can. How relaxed do you feel while playing? Have you ever felt fatigued and thought you need to go back to the basics and a more relaxed approach? For sure. I always want to be more relaxed. Even like people tell me sometimes that I look relaxed when I'm playing, but I don't feel relaxed. Mentally, anyway. Maybe like physically, I've trained myself to play more or less relaxed, but sometimes like you just kind of get tense, but yes, I come from a school of brass playing, of being relaxed, of being tension free, going for the easiest flow of air. So for me, I try to think about that relaxed approach from the beginning. So Harold's asking about that, and when you're playing long tones or you're playing flexibilities, you gotta go to the basics and always approach it with everything from that ease of playing, from that nice smooth approach. It's all good. So you should, should is such a relative word. I think that you might have success if you go from every single thing you do, from scales to tunes to improvising to playing parts, with a relaxed approach, because it's going to help avoid certain problems that arise when people play with too much tension. I've had students, I've had friends that have lost their ability to play because they've developed focal dystonia from playing too hard a lot of times. So as relaxed as you can, breathe as easy as you can. And I'm not a big fan of any of those like breathing gym sort of things. Like I feel like, and the reason is not that because I don't think they have a sound reasoning. It's because I think it develops tension. That's all. And I think I'm just against tension. So any quick tips on playing really up tunes? Countdown 26-2. Well, those are really hard and really fast. So for up-tempo tunes in general that aren't those ones, I say that you need to practice slow what you want to play fast, meaning you need to practice the language you want to play with the approach of playing it fast. So for me, that means a multiple tongue. But I need to practice that all double tongue, but slow, so that I can start to play faster tempos. But if I don't do it double tongue slow, it's like there's certain trombone things that just won't happen very well, or they happen differently with the double tongue versus single tongue. So you have to practice it slow so that you've dealt with the issue, so that when you go to playing fast, it's easier, right? Because you've already played it slow and figured out how to play it clean with the double tongue. So oftentimes what I find is that there's like students often have like a gray zone of where it's like double tongue, single tongue, and then there's this area where we need to practice that crosses over. That's like the single tongue needs to get faster and the double tongue needs to get slower. So we can kind of get rid of that gray zone, but then also practicing slow what you want to play fast. There's no way, if you can't improvise on 26-2 at this kind of tempo and play constant eighth notes through, there's not really a whole lot of hope for being able to think your brain can handle it twice as fast, So you got to give your brain a chance, number one. And you got to practice. I'll just say it one more time, and then I got to jump off here. But practice slow what you want to play fast. So I hope that helps you. And we'll be back next week, every Friday, at usually at 1 p.m. Eastern. Today we were a little late because of that masterclass, but usually around at 1 p.m. Eastern on Instagram and Facebook. So appreciate you all, and see you next time.